Here is one of a series of talks by spiritual leader Lola McDowell Lee, spanning 2 decades from the early 70s through the 90s. Lola was a Zen Roshi, whose Rinzai lineage included Dr. Henry Plutov and renowned Zen master Shigetsu Sasaki. Lola was a religious scholar as well as an ordained Christian minister. While the talks are focused mainly on Zen and Buddhism, Lola drew on many spiritual traditions, including those of Jesus, Plato, Lao Tzu, the Hindu Vedas, Meister Eckhart, and Gurdjieff.
One evening, as Shichiri Kojun was reciting sutras, he's there in his little room, and you know how the Japanese they have a little altar, Anyway, this little man is kneeling in front of this altar, and he's chanting the sutras, and there was a thief came in with a very sharp sword, and he was demanding, give me your money or I'll take your life. So Shichiri just very calmly said, don't disturb me. You can find the money in the drawer over there. And then he just went on with his chanting, his recitation. And a little while later, he stopped suddenly and he says, don't take it all. I need some to pay the taxes tomorrow. So the intruder gathered up most of the money and he started to go out the door, and this Shichiri yelled after him again, hey, thank a person when you receive a gift. And so the man thanked him and he left. And a few days later, he was caught, this thief. And finally he confessed to quite a number of robberies and also this offense against Shichiri. So they called Shichiri in as a witness. And he said there on the witness stand, this man is no thief, at least not as far as I'm concerned. I gave him the money and he thanked me for it. And then after the man had spent his time in prison for all the other offenses, he went to Shichiri and he became his disciple. Yeah. Nice little story. In the New Testament of our Bible, it is written, judge ye not. That's good Zen, huh? That's a good attitude toward life. You don't judge. When we come into this world, however, one of the first things we learn, the very first thing we learn, is discrimination. We begin to judge. And it's very necessary. We learn discrimination first through our sensations. We learn hot and cold. We learn pleasure, pain. Before we even learn to think, we have got this thing of pleasure, pain. The baby's either wet or it's dry. If it's wet, it cries. It's not pain, but it's not pleasure. So here we have this thing, pleasure, pain. And then we go along a little bit and we learn all kinds of discriminations. We learn to discriminate about people, about colors, and about words, maybe not necessarily in that order, but on and on and on, we learn to discriminate. And some people keep up this process of discrimination until the day they die, right? It's necessary. However, there is in the lives of some something else, They have a hunger, here and there we find one, who has a hunger to transcend this discriminating mind, this bickering that goes on in our heads all the time, He did this and that's no good, and she did that and that's no good. And so, we want to see something other than this, and we realize it's only just bickering that's going on in our heads. We begin to practice meditation. And then in the practice of meditation, one day we stumble across this what we could call a non-ego state. And then we can begin to see what non-discrimination is all about. Now we can begin to know non-discrimination. It's not a matter of sitting here, well, I'm not going to think this, and I'm not going to think that, and I'm not going to say this, and I'm not going to feel that. In this non-discriminative state, then we know what is judge ye not. Because we can see that everything is dependent on everything else. There is in this universe a mutual relationship. We are all mutually here. We are all in a relationship together with everything else. Everything is in a unity. And to see that unity, one sees non-discrimination. It's a state of consciousness. It's a state of that in which it knows itself. It knows itself, it knows the universe, right? Now, in the Bible, and I'm not against it, as you know, I'm very for it because there's some good things in there. However, it says, judge ye not, and it doesn't stop there. It goes right on and says, so ye will not be judged. See? Now, this is no more Zen. It's a bargain. You're making a deal. I won't think this way, so nobody will think this way about me. Well, how are you going to govern somebody else's thinking? And you say to yourself, well, now, I won't say this is bad. I never hear anybody, or seldom, I guess I should say, I won't say this because it's good. Yeah. Life itself, this flame in itself, is neither good nor bad. Because it actually transcends our values. Our values are mental. And it transcends morals. When we say, so that you will not be judged, we already now have a condition. And because that condition, fear and guilt have entered the picture. I can't do this because, what might happen to me. How can one drop judgment, the judging of something, out of fear or out of greed? How can you, Now, neither is going to make you value-free. It's based on the ego. You want to escape punishment, that, you're a little fearful may come to you. How can I go to heaven, if I fear punishment? See, the values that we place on situations, our values placed on situations does not get rid of the judging, because we have in there then a condition. I have this condition, therefore I must do this. This is this condition, therefore I must do that. Condition, very simply condition. I'm happy, I'm sad, two conditions. Now, when something is unconditional, when there is no condition, then it's value-free. If you make a condition, you miss the point. In the unconditional, there is no fear, there is no greed, there is no heaven, there is no hell. Unconditional does not make people greedy by alluring them and promising them some rewards. It doesn't pat them on the head and say, if you do this, I'll give you a piece of candy. Nor does it try to frighten by creating concepts of hell. See, then you're conditioned. It doesn't try to bribe you, and it doesn't try to punish you. To be unconditioned is to be as this universe. See? To be unconditioned, the unconditioned state. See, then you have insight into this universe, and it is that insight that frees you. See? That look once. If you stop to ponder on it, you have missed the point. Now, this is the insight into yourself that leads to what we call knowing of the truth. It is the knowing of the truth that sets you free. We call it liberation. A free soul. This unconditioned, transcendent insight does not have greed as a base, and there is no fear as a base. It has no condition. In our Western world, and I think particularly as we travel through the Midwest, from whence I got out here somehow, we hear words such as God-fearing. We see somebody that's very religious, very pious, and very righteous, and he's a God-fearing man. You've heard that. I'm not alone in this boat, am I? No. God-fearing man. Well, do you really think religion is fear, or fear is religion? Fear is religion. One may have wonder, and one may look at this and be awed, and awed one certainly is, and this is a tremendous mystery. But fear? We have such crazy ideas, about good and about bad, and then we have fear, and we have guilt, and it cripples us, and it paralyzes us. How can you help another? How can you even help yourself to be free of fear if you're full of fear? Now, on the other hand, fear is something we're born with, or it comes about almost immediately, Well, I could even say it's almost an inherent thing. It's a survival thing. Our problem, of course, is that we have this survival thing, and there is a fear in it, because it's what guards us, keeps us on guard, And we take this now and we transfer it to the ego. So now, the next time that you feel fear, you look at it. Is it really a survival thing which is clean? Or is it something you have transferred to the ego? And then you are tottering, sort of on tiptoe. A survival thing, is going to continue as long as we're in this process that we call life. See, we must survive. Everything that lives has this, it must survive. Cats and dogs and birds and bees and flowers and so on may not be as aware of it as we are. But everything struggles to survive. There are times, because we are aware of this, that we may feel that everything is very useless, and that sometimes we're very desperate, and maybe we even would like for the whole thing to be over with. But when you're in that kind of a situation, Use it to good purpose. And there are those who even begin to question themselves at this point. You know, well, I'm over 21. Yeah, and this has happened to me, and that has happened to me, and the other thing has happened to me, and I look around, and what's this all about? Is this all there is? Is this all it's going to be? All those years stretching ahead of me, all this going up and down, sometimes happy and sometimes sad and sometimes in trouble, and you know, is that all it's going to be? Make some money, lose it, day after day after day after day. It's a good question. If you've ever really asked yourself that, you'll never forget. No. It does lead one to seek for something more. Because even when you're standing there in that gloomy attitude, my God, is this all it's going to be, all this out in front of me? I should be 21 again where I could say that. Huh? All this in front of me. Huh? In that gloomy attitude, you still know that there is life pulsating in you. And because life is pulsating in you, there is this expectancy that it is going to bring something more. So we begin to look further than the appearance. We begin to look at something other than the conditioning. When this ego comes up as such a problem, yeah, because it trembles in fear, and it shakes in cowardice, or it beams in its glory, yeah, and it has this greed, because we read in this book, the Bible, the night of the Last Supper, when Jesus is taking his leave, he's telling them, that something dire is going to happen, and he's giving them all this advice and so on. And these poor men are very disturbed, And then we look at the questions that they ask. Well, if you're going to leave, what will be my place in heaven? Well, they're all going to meet in heaven. He's told them that, But you haven't told me where I'm going to sit. We know that Jesus is going to sit at the right hand of God, but who's going to sit next to him? Yeah? Did you make your reservations? Huh? Yeah. It's like little rats worrying in here, It's just not understanding, that's all. Just not understanding. Everyone is concerned with his own interests. What about non-discrimination? Then what difference does it make where you sit? Maybe there aren't even any seats. You didn't even bother to ask that. Interrelatedness. We are all mutually here together. And we know of those who have rushed around trying to make a great deal of money, and they finally see that this isn't going to happen. So what do they do now with their lives? Well, they turn to God, don't they? The same greed that they had for money is now looking for God. Well, that's all right. It's good, huh? At least it's putting them in the right direction. But then we come up with such funny questions as, well, I wonder what he's thinking of me. Hmm? What's he going to say to me on the last day of judgment? All because we don't understand ourselves. Hmm? This mechanism, this organism, makes pictures, creates images. We know that because, we see the purple flowers out there. Why are they purple? Why do you see them at all? The green and the purple. Well, because you've got eyes. You've got eyes because you have this, this mechanism, I call it sometimes. And the flowers are there to be seen. And then there's something else. Anyway, our objective self-consciousness is, we know ourselves in our world, this objective consciousness. We see things as things and objects. Objectively self-conscious we are. This objective consciousness has risen and is still rising out of the unconscious. And some people are very fearful of this unconscious. And then we have developed this subconscious, it's our storage bag, as it were. And this subconscious talks to the objective consciousness. Yeah? How? Through pictures, through images. When you dream, there's pictures. The subconscious is talking, or sometimes it's the unconscious, is talking the only way it can. It doesn't have any words, so it talks to you in pictures. And you make pictures. Before you learned words, you made pictures. And then you labeled the pictures that you made. Yeah. And so, of course, we're still doing this. We have a concept, and we have a picture. Right? You can see yourself thinking like this, Now, we make pictures, and it's a tremendous ability. We don't do it. It's the consciousness, in its three different states. Makes pictures. So we say we make pictures, And so we make a picture of how we think God should be. And we make pictures of how we think we should be. And we make pictures of how we think everybody else should be. Neat, huh? Yeah. If you're going to go run around carrying pictures of God in your head, how are you going to know the real? Because it doesn't live up to your expectation, to your picture. What is the non-picture God? The actual. Your picture becomes a barrier. And this is why in Zen they've got the phrase, when you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. That's all I mean. Get rid of your concept. We could once in a while try to accept existence as it is. We reject a great deal of it. And by our rejecting a great deal of it and accepting a little bit of it, not much has changed in these thousands of years. Thousands of years we've been rejecting. And the situation's about the same, isn't it? Thieves haven't disappeared. Wars haven't disappeared. What have we changed? What can we do? We can try to understand ourselves, and we've got to start there. Try to understand what is understanding. Try to understand what is awareness. Try to understand what is consciousness. Not the conditions, but the things actually. We try to develop a capacity to see existence as it is. Understand life as it is. Try to understand man as he is. Don't impose your own ideals, don't say, well, he should be more of this or more of that. The should then becomes the barrier. If you judge a person, or if you expect so many things from a person, and you judge and he isn't what you expect him to be, you will never know what he is. If you put a person in a little pigeonhole, and you expect him to remain thusly until the end of time, and then because he's alive, he acts differently than we expected, and we say, he deceived me. The minute that you think about a person, that man's no good, how can you look in his eyes? How can you see the life? You've decided, and so you're finished with it. This man's no more of a mystery. This is the way he is. You've solved the whole mystery with your shoulds and should nots. You've written on his forehead a nice label, good or bad. Now, the minute you do that, you are no longer dealing with the person. You're dealing with your labels. That person is alive, He has moods. He has attitudes. He changes from one minute to the next. Don't you? You don't want to sit in a pigeonhole, do you? You want to put somebody else there? That's not fair, is it? Is it? No. Old Chuang Tzu, the old, we call it Lao Tzu, the philosopher, but Chuang Tzu, he was old, and his disciples were fearful that he was going to retire, or he wasn't going to work with them anymore, or he might even die. So one day one of them asked him, is your work finished? And he looks at him, he says, how can it be finished? I'm still alive. No. Remember that. Your work isn't finished. You're still alive. When a tree is alive, new leaves come in the spring. And then the flowers come. And then the birds come and make their nests. And then the little birds grow up and they leave. And the flowers fade. And the leaves turn red and gold and they drop off. And then new leaves come. And the flowers come. And the birds come. And then they leave. It's constantly changing. Constantly changing. And while you're alive, it's constant change. And everything is possible because you are alive. Everything is possible. But when you label somebody, look at the trouble you create for yourself. He doesn't live up to your label perfectly. He can't. And then you think, well, as I said, he's deceived me. And it is only your labeling that has been deceived. He may have tried to fit into your frame, but one day or another, he's going to step out of that frame. He has got to. Because no one is here to fulfill your expectations. Nobody. You don't even fulfill your own. We move in one way today, we move in another way tomorrow. Nothing is all black and white. If we ourselves have moods and attitudes, then everybody else must have them. After all, we are all cut out of the same cloth, aren't we? Aren't we? Sure. We're no different from each other. However, sitting for meditation, eventually, sooner or later, comes this glimpse, this transcendent moment. And being established then in it, then there comes this living from moment to moment to moment, this continuum of now. So that then one looks around and is alive, is living. One sees, and is living. Feels around and lives. There's no fixed pattern as to what must be. There is only then the awareness to guide. And in that then, with no fixed pattern, there is the spontaneity of this moment. Yeah. There is the responsiveness of this moment. He responds to you. He responds to this moment, to this question, to this situation. It's not a learned situation. It's a responding to life. You can't memorize that. It's spontaneous of this moment. And wherever there are two or more, there is life. To respond to. Wherever you are, all alone, there is life. There is this moment. Now, most of us here have heard of the story of Buddha. When he held up the lotus flower, he sat there before the 500 monks and held up the lotus flower and sat there and didn't say a word, and sat there and didn't say a word, and sat there and didn't say a word. And the poor monks didn't even dare fidget. They just sat there and looked at the flower. And finally, one of them, Mahakashapa, he smiled and became the Buddha's successor. And it does come about that Roshis ask, their monks, their disciples, what was that secret? What was given through this flower? What happened in that moment so that Mahakashapa smiled? And this young Roshi was asking this, in front of a group of monks one day. And one monk got up and he danced around, hippity-hoppity, and then he ran out. And just as he hit the door, the Roshi said, right, exactly how it is. And the old Roshi, he's standing by the door, came that night to see this young Roshi and said, you should not agree so soon. I suspect that your agreement was too early. So this worried this man, So later that night, he went to see this monk. Because, they feel responsible. Most of them. And he asked the same question again. What was it that the Buddha gave to Mahakashapa? What was it that Mahakashapa understood? Why did he smile? What was it? And this young monk got up and he danced again. And the Roshi hit him now, and he hit him hard, He says, that is absolutely incorrect. And the poor little monk says, but this morning you said it was right, Yes, in the morning it was right, in the evening it is wrong. Because you are only repeating. It is not the spontaneity of this moment. You are not responding. You're acting out of a memory. That's not living. in life, you don't have ready-made answers. You respond. And in this kind of living, you're open. See? And in that openness, you trust. And you work with yourself, and by, you begin to see things as they are. As they are. You begin to trust the life. You don't have to trust yourself, because you don't anyway, you know. But that you trust the life. You trust the ground you stand on. And you have respect for it. And you have great awe for it. For such as it is. And so it is called suchness. Such as it is. And in that suchness, one sees the interdependedness, the interrelatedness of all of existence. The whole universe is one unit. It is uni. It is one. It's not multi. We see multi. But it is called a universe, a one. Saints and sinners are a part of one net. Yeah? They're not separate. Good and bad are part of one net. They're not separate. Light and dark and life and death. One net. Everything is connected. If you really know life, you will know there's no death. Because form is formless and formless is form. You sing it every time you come here. Know what you're singing. Yeah? You know, and this saints and sinners, huh? There's Jesus and there's Judas. And this is a tremendous mystery. Now supposing, just supposing, that Judas was necessary. Now, he was a disciple that had been with Jesus for quite a long while. He was the educated one. He was the intellectual. And he loved his teacher. To sell his beloved teacher for 30 pieces of silver. How much am I worth, John? 30 pieces of silver. No, you can't do that to me. No. But now supposing, just supposing for a moment, that whole thing was planned, that it was contrived. Because Jesus was crucified, and there was such an impact at the time, you know, and all of what happened, his message has survived. He was the exemplar. He was the example of something that is supposed to happen to us, of this transcendence. If he hadn't died in that way, how could he have visited the disciples, you know, met them on the road and instructed them? How could he have risen from the tomb and stood there in the garden and talked to Mary and say to her, "Touch me not, I have not yet risen to the Father"? You see, it's really a very esoteric teaching. And the Zenists have the koan, you know, before your mother and father were, what was your original face? Well, okay, before your mother and father, and before their mothers and fathers, and before their mothers and fathers, and before their mothers and fathers, you know, all the way back to Adam, which if it wasn't there, this pyramid, you know, this foundation, you wouldn't be. You're still Adam. You're still out of the garden. Supposed to get back in. Yeah? Because of all of them, you. Yeah? This you. And you know, because it is like a pyramid. It is as if you are the apex. At this moment of all that has happened. And so in a manner of speaking, we have inherited the whole past. And it sits here. And now from you, comes the future. Your children and your children's children and your children's children, and each one of them an apex. The whole past and the whole future is involved right here. They meet. They're one right now, in this moment. The whole is at stake in you, this moment. What are you going to do with it? The whole of it crisscrosses in you, The koan, you touch a blade of grass and you touch the stars. You sneeze and a lion in Africa roars. I think it's called Jiji, Muji, Hokai. Interdependence. Japanese. Jiji, Muji, Hokai. I think, if I remember rightly. In India, it is called Indra's net. And of course, that's used all over now, too. The Zen people use it. Indra, the great god Indra, the supreme power, the logoic force, which is symbolized by the sun, this great giver of life, without which we wouldn't be. The great god Indra, the supreme power, his net extending throughout the whole universe. Vertically, they say it's time, and horizontally, it's space. And each point where these threads meet, there is a little crystal bead. The little crystal bead is a symbol of a single existence. Each little crystal bead reflects on its surface every other bead. And not only every other bead, but every reflection of every other bead. And every reflection of every reflection of every reflection. That's Indra's net. You live in it. You're one of the little beads. And so in Zen they have compassion for everything, for all. They have a gratitude for all. They have a respect for all. We are all only little beads on this net, because everything is involved with everything else. There's an old story out of China, which I like. And this very wealthy woman went to a teacher asking about, what is it all about? How can I know what it is all about? And so finally he decided he would go and stay with her, and while he was in her palace, he remodeled a room. And one day he brought her into this room. The floors were mirrors. The walls were mirrors. The ceilings were mirrors. And in the center he had set a little statue of the Buddha. The Buddha everywhere. And finally he put a little candle there, light. And this, the whole room was fantastic. Because the mirror not only reflected the flame and the Buddha, but it reflected every reflection. Over and over and over and over again. You have a mind. They call it mirror mind. Indra's net. Jesus said according to St. Thomas, when you have a foot in place of a foot, and a hand in place of a hand, and an image in place of an image, and eyes in place of an eye, then you shall enter the kingdom. They're all talking about the same thing. Only we have to learn how to read and how to interpret according to how we are and not how we have been conditioned. So this Shichiri Kojun, he's in there reciting sutras when this thief comes in with a sword, demands either his life or his money. And he says, don't disturb me. Take the money, it's in the drawer, but don't take it all. I need some for the taxes. So the intruder gathers up the money, and as he's leaving, this Roshi says, thank a person when you receive a gift. Now, of course, we all know money has a purpose. Yeah. It's a necessity in this world. But you don't need to be for or against it. It's money. And we do realize that we've come into this world empty-handed, and we're going to leave it empty-handed. Except one thing we came in with and one thing we're going to leave with. Not the money. You don't own the world. Nobody owns it. We use it. We're all here together using this world. Anyway, this intruder finally became this Roshi's disciple. But you know how great, this Roshi, to see in such a way, to see so clearly, that because, he said, what he did, when you receive a gift, thank a person, He changed his disciple. And he changed him with such a skill that not even a sound was heard. There was no big boom in here, boom, He took away and he created again. And the intruder was not even aware of what had happened. Yeah. And Shichiri accepted this man because, and this is, I think, part of what this little story is all about, you do not need to fight the darkness. All you need to do is light a candle. You light a candle. You don't fight the darkness. And there's another story that's very similar to this, and it's this master Taigan, who at midnight one night is sitting there in his little room writing a letter, and this thief comes in with this huge sword, swishing the sword around, And the Roshi looks up at the thief, and he says to him, what do you want? My money or my life? Well, now this thief had never come across anything like this dragon sitting there, Someone saying, you choose. You want my money, you want my life. So he's really taken aback. And finally he stammers out, well, I came for the money. So the Roshi takes out his purse and hands it to him. And then he returns to writing his letter like nothing had happened. And the thief was very ill at ease, and he's standing there with his sword, and he didn't really know what to do. So he begins to out of the room, And he gets to the door, and the Roshi all of a sudden says, hey, wait a minute! My God, the roof fell down. Nobody can yell at me. And the thief is standing there shuddering for a moment, who knows what now, And the Roshi says, why don't you close the door? How beautifully they make use of the moment, huh? Really. Well, and of course this thief was caught too, And he said, later, I've been robbing for years, but I was never so terrified as I was when that little moment, when that man called out to me, hey, wait a minute, So he said, the day I leave prison, that's where I'm going. I held a sword in my hand, but that was nothing because that man is a sword. You know, there is a difference. A tool in the hand or being the tool. Okay? And now, may the peace and the power that passeth all understanding hold us and keep us in the love of the Christed consciousness while we are seemingly separate one from another. And I thank you very much.
If you find Lola's talks valuable, more will be posted in weeks to come.